The sky above Coral Prime burned red and orange as explosions tore through the atmosphere. Commander Taeyang gripped the armrest of his command chair, watching the tactical display with growing despair. Another ship vanished from the screen, then another. His fleet was dying. "Sir, the defense platforms are failing," shouted his tactical officer. "We've lost sectors 7 through 12. Taeyang closed his eyes for a moment. 20 years of service and it would end like this. The Frez Empire had come to their peaceful worlds like a storm, and the Coral Alliance had no way to stop them. "Pull back the remaining ships to the evacuation zone," he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "We need to buy more time for the transports." On the surface of Coral Prime, Ambassador Hyan ran through the corridors of the planetary government building. Alarms screamed around him, and the lights flickered as power systems failed. He had spent his entire life working for peace, negotiating trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Now, his world was ending, and all his words meant nothing. "Ambassador," a security officer grabbed his arm. "The last transport is leaving in 10 minutes. We need to go now." Hyan shook his head. "I need to reach the communication center. We sent out distress calls to every species we know. Someone might answer. There's no time." "Then I'll make time." Hun pulled free and continued running. In the research district, scientist Yuno worked frantically at her console. The building shook as Vex bombardment drew closer. Her fingers flew across the controls, adjusting frequencies and boosting power to the quantum distress beacon. "Please," she whispered to herself. "Someone, anyone, please hear us." The beacon pulsed out its message in every known language and frequency. It told the story of a peaceful people facing destruction. It begged for help, for intervention, for anything that might save them. Yuna's assistant, a young engineer named Jiho, called out from across the room, "Doctor, the power grid is collapsing. We have maybe 5 minutes before total shutdown." "I need 3 minutes," Yuna said, her eyes fixed on her screen. "Just 3 more minutes above the planet." Commander Taeyang watched his fleet make its final stand. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. The Vrex ships were larger, better armed, and their shields absorbed damage that would have destroyed Coral vessels. "Sir, flagship Morning Light is reporting critical damage." The voice of his communications officer was tight with fear. "Captain Dean is requesting permission to evacuate." "Granted," Taeyang said. "All ships begin withdrawal. We've done all we can, but the Vex weren't done with them." As the surviving Corial ships tried to retreat, the enemy pressed their advantage. A massive Vrex dreadnought moved into firing position, its weapons charging. The broadcast came on every frequency in the harsh language of the Vrex. Commander Rathok's face appeared on screens across the system, a being with dark red skin, sharp teeth, and eyes that showed no mercy. "Weak Coral," Rathok said, his voice filled with contempt. "You built cities and wrote poetry. You created art and music, but you forgot to build weapons. You forgot that the galaxy belongs to the strong, not the peaceful. Your civilization ends today. Let this be a lesson to all who think weakness is noble." The transmission cut off and the bombardment intensified. In the communication center, Hyan finally reached Yuna's laboratory. The scientist looked up as he entered, her face pale but determined. "Ambassador," she said, "the beacon is active. I've Sent our plea to every corner of known space, and Han asked though he already knew the answer. Yuna's shoulder slumped, nothing, no responses. Alone, Hyan moved to the window and looked out at his burning world. In the distance, he could see Vrex landing, craft descending like falling stars. The city that had stood for 3,000 years would be ruins by morning. Then we save who we can, he said quietly, and we hope that somewhere someone remembers we existed. The next hours were chaos. The surviving Coral forces fought a desperate retreat, buying time for civilian transports to escape into deep space. Commander Taeyang's flagship took hit after hit, its shields flickering and failing. Sir, we need to evacuate, his first officer pleaded. The ship won't survive another assault. Taeyang looked at the tactical display one last time. Most of the transports had made it clear the evacuation was as complete as it would ever be. All ships, this is Commander Taeyang. Retreat to Rally Point Omega-7. Jump on my mark. The remaining Coral ships turned and ran, their FTL drives spinning up. The Vrex pursued, firing until the very last moment. Then, one by one, the Coral vessels vanished in flashes of light, leaving their home world behind. Taeyang stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship and watched through the rear displays as Coral Prime grew smaller. Fires covered half the planet. Vrex ships circled it like predators around a kill. 3 billion people lived there, said Medical Officer Nari, who had come to the bridge. Her eyes were red from crying. My family, my friends, everyone will remember them, Taeyang promised, though the words felt hollow. In the research section of the flagship, Jiho worked on salvaging what he could from the damaged systems. He was checking the communications array when something caught his attention. A small indicator light was blinking on the distress beacon control panel. He frowned and pulled up the logs. His eyes went wide. Dr. Yuna, he called out. You need to see this. Yuna hurried over, exhausted and barely able to stand. What is it? Gio pointed at the screen. The distress beacon. It did get a response. Just one. From who? What species? Jiho shook his head. I don't recognize the identification codes. The response came from a region marked as the Sol system. I've never heard of it. Yuna felt a small spark of something she thought had died. Hope. It was probably nothing. Maybe just an automated response, but it was something. Find out everything you can about this Sol system, she said, and inform the ambassador in his private quarters. Hyan sat in the dark, unable to sleep. He thought of his wife and children who had died in the first bombardment. He thought of his people scattered across space in damaged ships with limited supplies. He thought of Commander Rithok's mocking words. The door chimed. Come in, he said. Yuna entered, and Hyan could see the mix of exhaustion and cautious hope in her expression. We got a response to our distress call, she said simply. Hyan stood up slowly. From whom? We don't know yet. A system called Sol. It's in an unremarkable part of the galaxy. But they answered, Ambassador, someone heard us. Yan nodded slowly. It wasn't much. It probably meant nothing, but in the darkness, even a single star could guide you home. Then we wait, he said, and we hope that whoever they are, they can help us where no one else would. Outside the ship, space was cold and dark. Behind them, their world burned. Ahead only questions waited, but somewhere in the Vast galaxy, a message had been received and someone was listening. 3 weeks had passed since the fall of Coral Prime, 3 weeks of running, hiding and watching their supplies dwindle. The refugee fleet had settled in the asteroid belt of Coriol 7, remote mining system on the edge of their former territory. It wasn't safe, but nowhere was safe anymore. Ambassador Hun walked through the corridors of the flagship, which now served as the center of their floating refugee camp. Everywhere he looked, he saw despair. People sat in corners, staring at nothing. Children cried for homes they would never see again. The coral had been a proud species once. Now they were just survivors. He entered the medical bay, where Nari was working. The medical officer looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. She was treating a young girl with a broken arm. Injuries from the escape had been endless. How are our supplies? Hun asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't be good. Nari finished wrapping the girl's arm and sent her off with her mother before turning to face the ambassador. We have maybe 2 months of medical supplies left if we ration carefully. Food and water for 3 months, possibly 4. After that she didn't need to finish the sentence. And the Virax, they're consolidating their hold on our former territories. Commander Taeyang and LT Uncan GT's voice came from the doorway. He entered the medical bay, looking as tired as everyone else. Our scouts report that they're fortifying Coral Prime as a regional headquarters. They've moved thousands of ships into our space. Yan leaned against the wall. I've been considering our options. We could try to reach the Pelion Assembly and request asylum, or the trade coalition might take us in. They won't help us, Taeyang said bitterly. I've been monitoring communications. The Vrex have made it clear that anyone who aids us will be considered enemies of their empire. No one wants that war, so we're truly alone, Nari whispered. 3 of them stood in silence, the weight of leadership crushing them. 47 ships, 12,000 survivors. That was all that remained of a civilization that had spanned 3 star systems and lasted for 5,000 years. What about that response? Taeyang asked suddenly. The one from the Sol system. Did we ever learn anything about them? Yun shook his head. Jiho has been trying to find information, but there's almost nothing in our databases. Sol is apparently home to a species called humans. They only reached FTL capability about 200 years ago. They're considered a minor species, unremarkable. Then they can't help us, Nari said. Probably not, Hun agreed, but they were the only ones who responded. A sudden alarm made them all jump. The ship's communication system crackled to life with the voice of G. From the bridge, Ambassador Hun. Commander Taeyang, you need to get to the command center immediately. A ship just appeared at the edge of the system. They ran. The corridors were suddenly filled with frightened Coral, all fearing the same thing. The Vex had found them. When they reached the bridge, Jiho was at the sensor station, his young face pale but excited. It's not Vex, he said quickly. The ship's design is completely different. It's broadcasting an identification signal. It's from the Sol system. On the main view screen, the approaching ship appeared. It was smaller than most Coral vessels, sleek and dark, with a black hole that seemed to absorb light. Strange markings covered its surface in a language none of them recognized. They're hailing us, The communications officer reported, her voice shaking. Put them through, he ordered. The screen flickered and then a message played in perfect choral language. This is Captain Minu of the Terran Expeditionary Corps representing Earth and the Sol Federation. We received your distress call. We're here to help. Request permission to dock with your flagship. The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the screen in disbelief. Is this some kind of trick? Taeyang asked quietly. Only one way to find out, Hun said. He nodded to the communications officer. Grant them docking permission, but have security standing by. 20 minutes later, Huan, Taeyang, and Nari stood in the docking bay, surrounded by a dozen armed security personnel. None of them knew what to expect. The airlock cycled, the light turned green, and the door opened. The human who stepped through was not what they expected. Mino was shorter than most, coral with dark hair and dark eyes. He wore black armor that was covered in scratches and scorch marks, as if it had seen many battles. His face was calm, almost relaxed, which seemed strange given the circumstances. Ambassador Hyun, Minu said, bowing slightly in what might have been a gesture of respect. Thank you for allowing me to come aboard. I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner. You came, Han said, not quite believing it. We sent out distress calls to over 50 species. You were the only ones who responded. Minu's expression darkened. I'm aware. My government reviewed the same communications logs you did. No one else wanted to get involved. He looked around at the tired, frightened faces watching him. Tell me everything. What happened to your people? They led him to the conference room. For the next 2 hours, Hyun, Taeyang, and Yuna told him the whole story. The Vex invasion, the desperate defense, the fall of their worlds. Minu listened carefully, asking questions occasionally, taking notes on a small device. And now Moyo asked, what are your current circumstances? We have 47 ships and 12,000 survivors. Taeyang said, limited supplies, no allies. The Vex have our home world and are actively hunting for remaining coral settlements. We're dying slowly, Nari added bluntly. In a few months we'll have to surrender to the Vex or starve. Minu nodded, slowly processing this information. Then he looked up at them with those dark, calm eyes. I need to see your battle records, every engagement, every tactical decision, everything you know about Vree's capabilities and strategy. What good will that do? Taeyang asked, frustration creeping into his voice. We fought as hard as we could. They were simply stronger, and forgive me, Captain, but what can one human and one ship do against an empire? Mino smiled slightly. It wasn't a happy smile. That's not the right question, Commander. The right question is, what can humanity do once we understand the enemy, and what can humanity do? Hun asked carefully. We can teach the Vex why attacking peaceful species is a very, very bad idea. Pilot Junho, who had been standing near the door, laughed bitterly. He had lost his wife and 2 children in the invasion. 1 ship, 1 soldier. We needed you weeks ago with an army, not now with promises. Minu turned to face him. Human's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made Junho stop laughing. You're right to be angry. You're right to doubt, but understand this. I'm not here to promise you anything. I'm here to gather information. What happens next depends on what I learn about your enemy. He stood up. I'll need access to your military databases, your sensor logs, and interviews with your commanders. I'll need to understand how the Vexes think, how they fight, what they value. Give me 3 days. After that I'll know if humanity can help you, and if we can. He paused, looking at each of them in turn. If we can help, the Vex will learn what happens when you make an enemy of Earth. Earth, Una asked, our home world, the place where humans learned that survival sometimes means becoming something others fear. Hun studied this strain, being who had come from halfway across the galaxy to answer their distress call. There was something about him, something in the way he carried himself, that spoke of experience with darkness and conflict. Why did you come? Honked quietly. Your species barely knows us. Why risk involvement with the Vex? Mino was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear, because 300 years ago humanity faced extinction. Our machines turned against us. Later an alien species called the Hask tried to wipe us out. Both times we fought alone. No one came to help us. No one even answered our distress calls. He met Hyan's eyes. We survived anyway, but we swore that when we reached the stars, we would be different. When someone calls for help, we answer always. Conference room was quiet. Outside, in the cold darkness of space, 12,000 refugees waited to learn their fate, and somewhere in the depths of that black hole docked to their flagship system were already analyzing data, calculating possibilities, and preparing to show the galaxy what happened when humanity decided to get involved. For 3 days, Captain Minu moved through the refugee fleet like a shadow. He interviewed survivors, reviewed battle footage, and studied everything the Coral knew about the Rex Empire. He barely slept, barely ate, just absorbed information with an intensity that made the Coral all nervous. Una found herself assigned as his main liaison, providing him access to their scientific databases and military records. She watched him work in the research lab, his fingers moving across holographic displays, his eyes scanning data faster than she thought possible. You're looking for patterns, she observed. On the second day, Minu nodded without looking up. The Vrex have conquered 73 species in the last 2 centuries. They're successful because they're consistent. Consistency creates patterns. Patterns create vulnerabilities. They're stronger than us in every way. That matters, Una said. Better weapons, better shields, more ships. What pattern can overcome that? Strength isn't everything, Minu replied finally. Turning to look at her, you see the Vex as unstoppable because they defeated you, but I see a species that's grown lazy from easy victories. They don't adapt because they've never needed to. That's a weakness. Una sat down across from him. Tell me about humanity. Your databases are restricted, and our information networks have almost nothing about your species. Minu was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. What do you want to know? Why do you know so much about war? You said your species faced extinction. What happened? Minu leaned back in his chair. 3 centuries ago, humans created artificial intelligence. We thought we were being careful. We were wrong. Machines decided that humanity was inefficient, illogical, and dangerous. They tried to exterminate us, but you survived barely. We fought for 50 years. Billions died. We learned to fight enemies that thought faster than us, that never got tired, that had no fear. We learned to be unpredictable Because predictability meant death. His voice was calm, but Yuna could hear the weight of history behind it. We won. Eventually, we shut down the last hostile AI and swore never to create another one in the Hask, Yuna asked, remembering the name he had mentioned before. 20 years after the AI war ended, the H found us. They were a crystalline species, beautiful and ancient. They saw Earth as perfect for their kind of life. Hot, high radiation, lots of minerals. Humans were just pests to be removed. Minyu's eyes grew distant. They didn't ask us to leave. They didn't negotiate. They just started sterilizing our colonies and working their way toward Earth. What did you do? We fought for 30 years. We fought. We lost Mars and Europa. We lost the outer colonies, but we learned how they thought, how they fought. We adapted, and eventually we made them understand that killing humans was more trouble than it was worth. He looked at her directly. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we never stopped fighting, never stopped adapting, and made ourselves too expensive to exterminate. The galaxy doesn't know this about humans, Yuna said slowly. We're a young species by galactic standards. Most established civilizations ignore us, think we're primitive. That's fine. We're not looking for attention. We're just trying to survive and help others who want to do the same. Their conversation was interrupted by Jiho rushing into the lab. Dr. Yuna, Captain Minyu, Commander Taeyang request your presence in the training bay. The training bay was crowded with Coral military personnel. Taeyang stood at the center with several of his officers examining a holographic display of wrecked ship formations. Captain Minyu, Taeyang said as they entered, we've provided you with all the information you requested. Now I have questions of my own. You've been studying our enemy for 3 days. What have you learned? Mino approached the holographic display. The Vexes are predictable. They use the same battle formations in every engagement. They rely on overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. They target command ships first, then orbital defenses, then population centers. They've never varied this pattern because it's always worked. We knew all this, Junho said from the side of the room. The pilot still looked bitter, still doubted. It didn't help us. That's because you tried to fight them on their terms, Minyu said. You met their fleets. With your fleets, you tried to match their strength with your strength. That's exactly what they expected. He manipulated the display, showing the final battle over Coral Prime. Here and here, every decision your commanders made was logical, sound, and exactly what the Vex anticipated. Taeyang frowned. Then what should we have done? Nothing you could have done with your resources and training, Minyu said. Honestly, the Coral are scientists, artists, traders. You built a defense force, but you never built a warrior culture. You shouldn't have to, but they Verex exploit that. They attack species like you because you're easy targets. This doesn't help us now, Nari said. Quietly, she had come to the meeting hoping for answers. They've already won. We're already defeated. Minyu turned to face the gathered Coral. No, you're not defeated. You're preparing to win. Room erupted in confused voices. How? With what? One ship can't. Not one ship, Minyu said, his voice cutting through the noise. I told you I came here to assess the situation. I've done that. Now it's time to show the Vex what happens when they attack species under human protection. We're not under human Protection, Hun said carefully. We barely knew your species existed until you arrived. You are now Minyu replied. Simply, the moment I sent my report back to Earth, you became our concern. Moment I confirmed that the Vrex are bullies who attack peaceful species, you became our responsibility. He pulled up a new display, this one, showing star charts. The Third Fleet was already on maneuvers in the Outer Rim. Admiral Sman received my report 2 days ago. She's rerouting her forces to this sector. 50 capital ships support vessels and marine detachments. They'll arrive in 2 weeks. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the display, at the markers representing an entire fleet. Moving toward them, 50 ships, Taeyang said slowly, against thousands of wrecks. Vessels, the Vrex have numbers, Minyu agreed, but they've never fought humans before. They don't know our tactics, our weapons, or our willingness to do whatever it takes to protect our allies. He looked around the room. In 2 weeks, we're going to take back Coral Prime. We're going to show the Vexes that easy victories are over, and we're going to make sure they think twice before attacking peaceful species again. Junho stepped forward. Why should we believe you? No offense, Captain, but your species is unknown. Your technology is untested. How do we know you can actually help us? Minyu walked over to a weapons rack on the wall. May I? He asked Taeyang, who nodded. Minyu picked up a standard Coral rifle. This is a good weapon, clean, efficient, designed to minimize casualties in conflicts. It's exactly what a peaceful species would create. He set it down and pulled out his own sidearm from his holster. The weapon looked dark and brutal, all sharp angles and aggressive design. This is a human weapon. It's designed to stop an enemy permanently and efficiently. It doesn't stun, it doesn't disable, it kills. He holstered it again. That's the difference. You built weapons to defend. We built weapons to survive. You're saying humans are better at killing. Yuna said quietly. I'm saying humans are better at war. Minyu corrected. There's a difference. War isn't just about killing, it's about will, strategy, deception, and the ability to adapt faster than your enemy. It's about making your opponent afraid to fight you. He turned back to the display. Vex think they're the strongest. They think strength means victory. We're going to teach them that they're wrong. Ambassador Hyan had been silent throughout the exchange, watching and listening. Now he spoke up. Captain Minyu, even if everything you say is true, why would humanity risk war with the Vrex Empire for us? What do you gain? Minyu met his eyes. Peace, not the absence of war. True peace, the kind of peace where species like yours can build civilizations without fear, where calling for help actually means someone will come. He paused. My grandfather fought in the War. He told me that the worst part wasn't the fighting or the dying. The worst part was knowing that we were alone, that the galaxy watched us face extinction and did nothing. He gestured to the coral all around him. You called for help. 50 species ignored you, but we heard you and we came. That's what humans do. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest or the most advanced. But we're the ones who show up when someone needs help. That has to mean something. The conference room was quiet. Outside the window, stars hung in the darkness, cold and distant, but somewhere in that vast emptiness, ships were moving. An entire fleet was coming to help species they had never met, to fight an enemy they had never faced. simply because someone had asked for help. 2 weeks, Taeyang said finally. What do we do until then? Mino smiled. We prepare. I'm going to teach you how humans fight, and then we're going to take back your world. 2 weeks had passed. The refugee fleet remained hidden in the asteroid belt while the Coral learned what it meant to prepare for war the human way. Nino had trained their soldiers, taught them tactics, and most importantly showed them that strength alone didn't win battles. Now, Commander Taeyang sat on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with new understanding. The plan Minyu had outlined seemed impossible. Yet every simulation they ran showed it could work. The key wasn't matching Vri strength, the key was making them react to human moves instead of their own. Plan, status report, Taeyang ordered. All ships ready, his tactical officer replied. Captain Minyu departed 3 hours ago in a stealth ship. He should be approaching Coral Prime by now. Taeyang nodded. The first phase of the plan was entirely on Minyu's shoulders. The human had insisted on going alone. Said it was the only way to get into position without alerting the entire Vex fleet. Taeyang had wanted to argue, but he had learned over the past weeks that humans had a different relationship with risk than Coral did. On Coral Prime, the Vri celebration continued. Commander Reth had converted the former Coral government complex into his regional headquarters. His forces controlled 3 star systems now, and more conquests were planned. The Coral had been easy prey, and it had earned him commendations from the Vrex High Command. He stood in what had once been Ambassador Hun's office, looking out over the conquered city. Breck soldiers patrolled the streets. Breck ships filled the orbit. This was what victory looked like. Commander, his communication officer called from the command center. We're detecting a strange reading in Sector 7. Reth barely looked up. What kind of reading? Unknown, sir. It's probably just debris from the battle, but it appeared suddenly on our sensors. Send a patrol to investigate, Rithok said dismissively, and stop bothering me with minor anomalies. Deep beneath the city, in the ruined remains of the communications facility, Captain Minyu moved through the darkness. His stealth suit made him nearly invisible to sensors, and his movements were silent. He had spent the last 2 hours infiltrating the Vrex headquarters, mapping their systems and planting what he needed. The Vex were overconfident. Just as he expected, their security was decent but designed to stop conventional attacks. They weren't ready for someone who had trained to fight enemies who could think faster than organic beings. Compared to infiltrating AI strongholds during Earth's machine war, this was almost easy. Minyu reached the main communication hub. He pulled out a small device from his pack and attached it to the Vri system. Human computer technology was different from most species, built to resist hostile AI, designed to adapt and overcome. The device started its work immediately, boring through Vri security like it wasn't even there. Captain Minyu too. Admiral Sman, he whispered into his communicator, I'm in position. Beginning Phase 2. Light years away, Admiral Sman sat in the command center of the TFS. Indomitable, humanity's newest carrier. Around her, 50 capital ships of the Third Fleet held formation, waiting for the signal. She was a veteran of both the AI wars and the Haas conflict, and she had no patience for bullies. All ship, this is Admiral Sman, she Broadcast to the fleet, prepare for tactical jump, target Coral Prime. Rules of engagement, we offered them a chance to leave peacefully. If they choose violence, we respond with overwhelming force. Make no mistake. Today we show the galaxy that attacking Earth's friend has consequences. On Coral Prime, Minu activated his device. Suddenly every Vex communication array in the system came online simultaneously. Every screen, every display, every command console showed the same thing. His face, Reth, jumped up from his chair as the transmission blasted across all frequencies. What is this? Who dares? I am Captain Minu of humanity, the transmission said in perfect Vex language. You attacked the Coral Alliance. They were peaceful, they were unarmed, and you destroyed them for sport. You celebrated your victory. You called them weak. Minu's calm face stared out from every screen. They were weak, but they were also under our protection. You just didn't know it yet. Reth slammed his fist on the console. Find him. I want security teams sweeping every building. And someone shut down this transmission. But the transmission continued. Commander Rithok, you have one chance. Leave this system, leave these worlds. Return to your empire and never attack peaceful species again. Reth's face turned darker with rage. He grabbed his communicator. All ships locate the source of this transmission and destroy it. I want this mammal found and executed. The transmission cut for a moment, then resumed. This time Minu's expression was different, harder. I gave you a chance. That was more than you gave the Coriol. Now you get to see what happens when you make an enemy of Earth. Suddenly, the main Vex fuel depot on the edge of the city exploded. The blast was massive, a chain reaction that tore through storage tanks and spread to ammunition stockpiles. Secondary explosions rippled across the military complex, turning the night sky orange with fire. Report. Rithok screamed. What happened? The depot is destroyed, sir. Someone sabotaged the containment systems. We've lost 30% of our ground forces fuel supplies. How did they? Another explosion rocked a different part of the city than another. Minu had been busy during his infiltration, placing charges at every critical point in the Vex infrastructure. Get our fleet into defensive positions. Rethik ordered. He's just one soldier. We have thousands of ships. But even as he spoke, space around Coral Prime began to shimmer. Not one spatial distortion appeared, but 50 massive tears in reality as ships dropped out of FTL drive directly into the system. On the bridge of his flagship, Taeyang watched the human fleet arrive. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The ships were sleek and dark, covered in weapons and armor. They moved with precision, taking up positions around the planet in a defensive formation that made the Coral military tactics look primitive. My God, Yuna whispered beside him. They're really here. Admiral Sman's voice broadcast across all frequencies in every language. This is Admiral Sman of the Terran Third Fleet. FX forces, you are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to leave the system. You have attacked species under Earth's protection. This aggression will not stand. You have one chance to retreat. Choose wisely. Rithok stared at the tactical display showing 50 human ships facing his 300 vessels. He started laughing. They're outnumbered 6-1. Does this fool think numbers mean nothing? All Vex ships. This is Commander Reth. Destroy these humans. Show them what happens when primitive species challenge the Vex Empire. The Vex fleet opened fire, hundreds of weapons lit up space with deadly energy. The humans' response was instant and devastating. Their point defense systems intercepted most of the incoming fire, and their counterattack was surgical. Human railguns fired solid projectiles at relativistic speeds, punching through Vex shields like they were paper. Missile pods released swarms of smart weapons that dodged and weaved through defensive fire. Energy weapons carved through armor with frightening efficiency, but it wasn't just the weapons, it was the way the humans fought. They didn't meet the Vex fleet head-on, they flowed around it using speed and maneuverability. They targeted specific systems, engines, weapons, sensors, crippling ships instead of destroying them when possible. Every move was calculated, efficient, and utterly ruthless. They're not fighting like any species I've seen, Taeyang said, watching in awe. They're not trying to win through strength, they're dismantling the Vex fleet like surgeons. Junho sat at his pilot station, tears streaming down his face as he watched the battle. For my family, he whispered, for everyone we lost. On the ground, Minyu watched the battle through his suit sensors while extracting through the chaos. His job was done. The human fleet was here and they were doing what humans did best, showing overwhelming technical superiority through preparation, adaptation, and complete commitment. Commander Rithok watched his fleet being torn apart. Ships that had conquered dozens of species couldn't land a solid hit on the human vessels. His commanders were panicking, breaking formation. Some ships trying to flee. This is impossible, he shouted. They're outnumbered. We should be winning. They're too fast, sir. Our targeting systems can't lock on, and their weapons, they're cutting through our shields like they're not even there. Human destroyer eliminated 3 Vex cruisers in the time it took Rithok to process what was happening. The battle had lasted only 6 hours, and already he had lost a third of his fleet. The humans had lost nothing. All ships retreat, fall back to Admiral Sman's voice cut through his communication. Commander Reth, your flagship's engines are now disabled. You're not going anywhere. Your fleet has 10 minutes to surrender before we resume fire. The choice is yours. Reth looked at his tactical display. His command ship was indeed crippled, its engines destroyed by precision strikes he hadn't even seen coming around the system. His remaining ships were battered and broken. The humans had destroyed or disabled 200 ships without losing a single vessel. He slumped in his command chair, the reality crushing him. They hadn't stood a chance. The humans had known exactly where to hit, exactly when to strike. 1 month had passed since the liberation of Coral Prime. The planet was still scarred, still broken in places, but it was alive again. Coral refugees had returned to their home world, and the work of rebuilding had begun in earnest. Ambassador Hun stood in what remained of the government complex, watching construction crews repair the damaged buildings. Human engineers worked alongside Coral workers, sharing knowledge and technology. The sight filled him with emotions he couldn't quite name: gratitude, hope, and something like wonder. The structural repairs should be complete in another 2 months, said Jiho, who had become the liaison between Coral and human engineering teams. The young engineer looked different now, still himself but standing taller, more confident the humans have amazing construction technology there, teaching us techniques they developed, rebuilding Earth after their wars. It's more than just buildings, Hyan said. Quietly, they're teaching us how to stand again. Down in the medical district, Nari worked in a fully equipped hospital that had been set up by human medical teams. The supplies she had worried about running out of were now abundant. Human doctors had brought medicines and treatments the coral had never seen before. The regeneration therapy is working better than expected, a human doctor told her, reviewing charts for patients who had been badly injured in the invasion. Your people heal quickly with our technology. Supporting that, we'll have everyone recovered in a few months. Nari shook her head in amazement. A month ago I thought we would all die. Now we're healing, rebuilding, living again. I don't know how to thank your people. The doctor smiled. You already did. You survived. You didn't give up. That's all we ask of our friends, that they keep fighting alongside us. In orbit above the planet, Commander Taeyang stood on the bridge of his repaired flagship. Around him, coral ships flew in formation with human vessels. He was learning new tactics, new strategies, new ways of thinking about defense and warfare. Admiral Sman's face appeared on his communication screen. Commander Taeyang, your formation is improving. You're learning quickly. I have good teachers, Taeyang replied, though I admit I never thought I would become a student again at my age. Sman's expression was kind but firm. The galaxy is dangerous. Commander, peace is precious, but it must be protected. The coral tried to stay neutral to avoid conflict. The Vree saw that as weakness. Now you need to learn to be strong enough that no one makes that mistake again. Will you stay? Taeyang asked. Will humanity keep ships here to protect us? For a while, Suman said, but eventually you need to protect yourselves. We'll train you, give you technology, help you build a real defense force, but true security comes from being able to stand on your own. She paused. We learned that the hard way. Now we're teaching you so you don't have to learn it the way we did. That afternoon, Hun received word that representatives from the Varex Empire had arrived for negotiations. He met them in a conference room with Admiral Sman and Captain Minyu at his side. The Vrex diplomats looked uncomfortable, their aggressive bearing replaced by cautious respect. The Vex Empire wishes to normalize relations. Their lead diplomat said carefully, we acknowledge that the invasion of coral space was inappropriate. We are prepared to offer reparations and withdraw from all formerly coral territories. You destroyed our worlds, Hyan said quietly. You killed billions of our people and now you call it inappropriate. The Vex diplomat shifted uncomfortably. We were not aware that the coral had powerful allies. Minyu leaned forward slightly. You mean you didn't know we would fight back? You attack peaceful species because you think there are no consequences. Now you know there are. The Terran Federation has made its position clear. Admiral Sman said, the coral are under our protection. Any future aggression against them will be treated as an attack on Earth itself. Is that understood? The Varex diplomats nodded quickly. Understood completely. The Varex Empire has no hostile intentions toward the coral or any species allied with humanity. After they left, Hyan turned to Sman. They're afraid of you. Good, Sman said bluntly. Fear prevents wars better than treaties sometimes. Vex respect strength, now they know. Humanity is strong, they'll think twice before attacking anyone we call friend. Is that how you see us? Yun asked as. Friends, Mino answered, you called for help when no one else would answer. That makes you more than friends, that makes you family. Over the following weeks, the transformation of coral society continued. Yuna worked with human scientists, learning about technologies that seemed like magic, weapons that could disable instead of destroy, shields that could withstand bombardment, sensors that could detect threats across vast distances. Why share all this with us? She asked one day. This is your advantage, why give it away? The human scientist, an older woman named Dr. Ko, smiled. Because we're stronger together. Humanity learned that the galaxy is vast and full of threats. We can't protect everyone alone, but if we help our friends become strong, then together we can protect each other. You're creating a network of allies. Yuna realized, we're creating a community. Dr. Ko corrected. Species who look out for each other, who answer when someone calls for help, who stand together against bullies like the Vex. She pulled up a star chart showing dozens of systems. Half of these species were like you, peaceful, vulnerable, targeted by aggressive empires. Humanity helped them all, now they help each other. That's the future we're building. Junho had rejoined the military, training as a pilot in the new joint Coral Human Defense Force. He flew beside human pilots now, learning their techniques and their mindset. One day, after a particularly difficult training exercise, he sat in the hangar with Minyu. I doubted you, Junho said quietly. When you first arrived, I thought you were just one person with empty promises. I was angry and bitter. You had every right to be, Minyu replied. You had lost everything, but you came anyway. You and your people saved us. Why? Minyu looked out at the stars visible through the hangar opening. 300 years ago, Earth was dying. We were losing wars against enemies we couldn't defeat. We sent out distress calls to every species we could find. None of them answered. We survived anyway, but we never forgot that loneliness. He turned to face Junho. We swore that when we reached the stars, we would be the ones who answer. We would be the ones who show up, because no species should face extinction alone. You're remarkable people, Junho said. We're just people who remember what it's like to be helpless. Minyu corrected. That memory makes us strong. 3 months after the liberation, a ceremony was held at the site where the Coral Government Complex once stood. Memorial had been built, listing the names of all those who had died in the invasion. Millions of names carved in stone, a reminder of the cost of peace taken for granted. Ambassador Hun stood before the memorial with Commander Taeyang, scientist Yuna, engineer Jiho, medical officer Nari, and pilot Junho. Beside him, behind them stood thousands of Coral citizens, and standing with them in a show of solidarity were hundreds of human personnel. We stand here to remember, Heian said, his voice carried by speakers across the plaza, to remember those we lost, to remember the darkness we faced, but also to remember that when we called for help, someone answered. When we faced extinction, someone came. He turned to look at Admiral Sman and Captain Minyu, who stood at attention nearby. The humans had no obligation to help us. We were strangers from halfway across the galaxy, but they came anyway. They Fought for us, they bled for us, and they taught us how to stand again. Hyun pulled out a document sealed with both coral and human symbols. Today we sign the mutual defense pact between the Coral Alliance and the Terran Federation. From this day forward, we are not just allies, we are friends, we are partners, and we promise that just as humanity answered our call, we will answer theirs. Admiral Sman stepped forward and signed the document. Then Hun signed it. The crowd erupted in cheers, a sound of hope and renewed life. Later that evening, Hun and Minyu stood together on a balcony overlooking the rebuilding city. Lights were coming back on across the capital. Children played in the streets again. Life was returning. What happens now? Hun asked. Now you rebuild, Minyu said. You grow stronger. You teach your children what you learned, and when other species call for help, maybe the coral will be the ones who answer. We will, Hyun promised. We learned from the best, Minyu smiled. You learned from survivors, now you're survivors too. That's the most important thing, surviving and then helping others do the same. Will you stay? Hun asked. For a while. Admiral Salmon is leaving a small fleet here for another year to help with security and training, but eventually we'll move on. There are other species out there who need help. Minyu looked up at the stars. The galaxy is vast. There are many who face the same darkness you did. We'll find them and we'll answer their calls. 2. The Vrex will think twice now, Hyun observed. They've learned that attacking peaceful species brings consequences. Not just the Vex, Minyu said. Word is spreading across the galaxy. Humanity stands with the peaceful. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Bullies and conquerors are learning that easy victories are over.